Most Texans think sobriety tests are a fair way to prove that they're sober, but they're actually built to make you look drunk. Officers give fast instructions, set you up to fail, then claim you were slurring or off balance, even if you haven't had a drop. I'm Barrett Dye. I've challenged these tests in court for years, and I've seen how often they're twisted to fit the arrest, not the facts. This video breaks down how cops use field sobriety tests to trick you during DWI stops, so you know what to expect, what they're really looking for, and how to protect yourself from bad evidence. Let's start with something most folks don't know. The main goal of field sobriety tests at a DWI stop isn't actually to give you a fair shot at proving you're sober. It's about collecting evidence against you. Here in Texas, the moment you're pulled over on suspicion of DWI, officers are already building a case. Everything they ask you to do, from walking a straight line to following the pen with your eyes, is carefully chosen to make you look impaired. You might think, if I just do what they ask, I'll prove I'm fine and get to go home quicker. But that's what cops are counting on. They want you to believe it's a simple pass or fail situation, when in reality, these tests are designed to trip you up. The officer is watching and recording your every move, looking for tiny mistakes or signs of nervousness that they can use to justify your arrest. Let me give you a real-life example. I had a client in Abilene, perfectly healthy guy with no history of drinking problems. He was pulled over after a late-night shift, and the officer said he looked tired. During the field sobriety test, he stumbled slightly due to a loose rock in the road. That stumble, just one misstep, was all the officer needed to claim he was impaired, and it was caught on the police dashcam. Even though my client wasn't drunk, that little slip was used as evidence in his case. So remember, these tests are less about finding the truth and more about making a case against you. That's the first way Texas cops can trick you during a DWI stop. Now let's talk about the instructions officers give for these tests. They sound simple: walk heel to toe, keep your arms at your sides, count your steps out loud. But the reality is, the instructions are often rushed or unclear, especially if you're nervous or scared. And if you miss even the smallest detail, the officer will mark it down as a clue of intoxication. Here's the catch: these field tests are tough, even when you're stone cold sober. Imagine standing on one leg, with cars whizzing by, lights flashing in your eyes. Maybe it's windy or raining, and you're feeling the pressure of the police staring you down. That's a lot for anyone. But if you mess up, the officer chalks it up to alcohol, not nerves or environmental distractions. I once had a client from Dallas, a young woman who was pulled over late at night. The officer gave her the instructions while talking fast, and even interrupted her during the test. She got flustered, forgot part of the instructions, and lost her balance. All of that went into the report as failing the test. In court, the video showed just how unfair the situation was, but she still had to fight hard to prove her side. Officers in Texas are trained to look for any slip-ups during these instructions. The less clear they are, the more likely you'll make a mistake. And every mistake multiplies your chances of getting arrested. This is one of the biggest tricks officers use against you. Here's another trick. Police often make you feel like you must do these field sobriety tests. It's not uncommon for a Texan to say later, "Well, the officer told me I had to." But here's the truth. Field sobriety tests in Texas are voluntary. You are not legally required to perform them. Officers often use language like, "Okay, step out of the car, we're gonna do a couple of tests." Or they'll say, "Let's check to see if you're all right to drive." They don't ask if you want to take the test, they just act like it's required, and most folks don't know the difference. They don't know any better. What the officer is doing is counting on your cooperation to build their case. The more you do, the more evidence they can collect. If you refuse, they might try to make you feel guilty or threaten you with arrest right there. But here's the truth: you have the right to politely refuse field sobriety tests in Texas. Yes, you might still get arrested, but you'll give the prosecution less ammunition to use against you later on. I had a client in the Panhandle who knew this. When the officer asked him to step out and do the tests, he calmly said, "I'd prefer not to." The officer tried to pressure him, but my client stood firm. Later in court, the officer had a lot less evidence to work with, and the case was much easier to defend. Don't let the pressure trick you. Know your rights before you're ever in that situation. Here's something that surprises most people. Even if you think you passed the field sobriety test, it might not matter. Remember, it's not pass-fail. That's right, you could do everything right, and the officer can still claim you failed. Why? because Texas law gives officers a lot of room to use their own observations as evidence. The tests themselves, like the walk and turn, one-leg stand, and horizontal gaze nystagmus, the eye test, are supposed to be objective. But in reality, the officer decides what counts as clues of impairment. For example, were you swaying? Did your eyes jerk a little? Did you hesitate just before starting? These judgments are incredibly subjective. A client of mine in South Texas did the test flawlessly, but the officer claimed he saw slight swaying and nervousness, which he used as evidence of intoxication. The dashcam video showed nothing unusual, but that didn't stop the officer from writing it all down in his report. That's how powerful an officer's word can be in a Texas courtroom. So, even if you feel confidence about your performance, remember, the officer gets to decide the outcome. This illusion of objectivity is another way the system tricks you during DWI stops. Now let's talk about something that catches people off guard. The system often ignores legitimate reasons for struggling with sobriety tests. Maybe you have bad knees, are overweight, have inner ear problems, or it's just a rough night with terrible weather. The officer is supposed to take these factors into account, but in reality, most don't. They'll often write in their report, "Suspect did not mention any medical issues," or "Subject appeared unsteady." Even if you try to explain, your reasons might be brushed aside. And unfortunately, many folks are too nervous to speak up, or they don't think their condition matters. A client of mine had an old ankle injury and told the officer about it before the test. He still had to do the one-leg stand and, unsurprisingly, lost his balance. The report barely mentioned his injury. In court, it became my job to explain what the officer ignored. If you have any medical or physical condition that could affect your performance, say so clearly and on camera. State it loud enough so the dashcam picks it up. But understand, the officer may still act like it doesn't matter. That's just another way the system is set up against you. So let's recap what you just learned. Cops in Texas use sobriety tests to trick you during DWI stops. Number 1, designed test to collect evidence against you, not to prove you're sober. Number 2, giving rushed or confusing instructions that set you up to fail. Number 3, pressuring you to take voluntary tests by pretending you have no choice. Number 4, basing their reports on their own observations, which can override even a flawless performance. Number 5, ignoring legitimate medical or environmental reasons for mistakes, unless you loudly and clearly point them out. Every single one of these tricks is legal, and they happen every day to regular Texans who just want to do the right thing. The best defense is knowing your rights before you ever get pulled over. If you found this helpful, you need to watch our next video right now, How to Beat a DWI Case in Texas. I'll break down the exact steps you can take before, during, and after a stop to defend yourself and avoid a life-changing conviction. That video could save your license, your job, and your peace of mind. We'll see you over there.